Do we have George? Can you hear us, George?
Yes, I can. Sorry. Yeah, it was. I just saw
Oh,
that you
I can't
were.
hear George anymore. Is it me?
Can you hear me?
I don't hear George.
I got a thumb.
There we go. Sorry, George. I wasn't hearing you.
Oh, that's okay. Don't worry.
Great to see you. I guess my first question. Is like, why do you think audience research is actually like such a difficult topic for people? Like, why don't we want to get? Are we almost reluctant to get to know the people better that we aim to serve, or what's the deal?
It's a great question, isn't it? It's sort of the perennial problem. My gut feel is that there's a few things going on. Perhaps we are afraid of what we might hear. Perhaps what we hear is going to contradict some of the work we've already done, and it might make us end up looking, a wee bit foolish. Perhaps the research industry hasn't done a good enough job of explaining to you guys, how simple it can be and how valuable it can be in terms of building your brand, making your services relevant, et cetera, et cetera. So for me, it's a bit of a push and a pull. And I think what's happened is, over time, we've jumped into the middle that's been created by that vacuum, and we've just said, well, do you know what? Let's just go and do some stuff. Let's go and do some branding and some marketing and roll out some services and to see what happens, because that's quite an easy thing to do. So online tools and stuff like that have made the convenience of creating stuff, campaigns and ideas and whatnot, really accessible for people. Whereas I think, we go back a few years and that process took a lot of time. And actually, in order to create a brand, you had to start somewhere. You had to do a wee bit of research and you had to go through that pain. So I think there's a number of factors that have sort of collided together to create what is essentially a little bit of a perfect storm, and locks people out of the benefits of audience research, I guess. But what
now that everything is becoming more and more digital, also in terms of people interaction, and maybe some of the introverts in the world becoming more introverted, I imagine that doesn't help in terms of you understanding your customers better.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's fair, and we've got. I mean, I'm sure I can speak for people on the call that we've got data coming out of our ears. I've got data everywhere, but in terms of what does that actually mean? How does it help us describe our audience in a way that we understand them and empathize with them? Well, a lot of the time it doesn't, because the data is primarily quantitative data. It's numbers, and numbers tell us what's happening, but they don't really tell us why. They don't give us the motivations, the feelings, the ideas of value in the customer that qualitative data does. So yes, we've got data, lots of it. Does it actually mean anything? Can we actually do anything with it? And sadly, a lot of the time the answer to that is no. But I'm on a little bit of a personal crusade to try and turn that round and kind of help you guys sort of take back a little bit of control and actually talk to customers in a way that you can elicit some of those feelings, get that empathy going with your organizations and your brand, and really tap into what people are thinking and feeling.
Perfect. Yeah, because obviously, so the way that we define brand is directing how people think and feel about you, which isn't an easy feat. And it's even harder if you don't know who you're serving and what matters to them and where you might be able to find them. So I'm sure everyone who's coming to the session might have a different motivation of like, hey, what's your problem with audience research? So feel free, like Katrina, to just share in the chat where questions might be. We have 2 questions from the group today. So we have Andy who has a question, and Ado, but Ado couldn't make it because he has the flu, so he's in bed. So I'm going to try and represent Ado as good as I can. But feel free to add any question. We're going to open up the floor as well after the section with Ado and Andy. Great. So I think what Katrina is saying here in the chat is something that I see a lot of people struggle with, this certainly is Ado's challenge as well. So I thought we could just jump in, George, and put some questions in front of you. If that's
Sure.
okay with you?
Yeah,
Cool.
please do. Fire away.
Yeah.
I'll do my best.
My name is Ado. I
Okay.
have I recently graduated from the Brand Change Academy. And during that process, we discovered that we need to know a lot more about our audience. So one of the things that I think is interesting is that sometimes you think like, but I have a product, and I'm sure there's, with this product, I'm solving something for someone. But there's also always a little bit of reverse engineering needed of like, oh yeah, but what was it solving again? So in this case, Ado is launching a line of CBD infused soft drinks. So those are soft drinks that are a little bit healthier for you than your Red Bull. They're created because they help you to focus, they help to reduce your anxiety, and they've got a lot more of the good stuff than, let's say, a Red Bull. So they don't give you the jitters. And so for Ado, while he was going through the process, it was really hard to figure out like, okay, well, I have this product, but really, like Katarina is also saying, like, there could be maybe 10 or 20 different types of audiences for this, and that would have a huge impact on the brand. So for instance, we have a CBD drink that that sense of focus and energy would be really beneficial for, like, let's say, the yoga hippie festival crowd. We might create like a boho type of brand for that. Or we might say, well, actually, what's really interesting is no one's going after the fatigued and overworked 30 to 45-year-old office worker who wants to perform better at work and who has a lot of anxiety at work. And he rightfully said, like, well, okay, how do I solve this conundrum? Like, how do I figure this out? Should I put this in front of people? What do I ask? And so we thought Ado come and ask the question of George, but I'm asking it on his behalf right now.
Okay. So there's quite a lot in there. I mean, one thing that I would sort of call out straight away is, and I know, I'm pretending that you're Ado, by the way, there, is we talk about which audience should I choose? Well, actually, the truth of it is we don't choose, they choose us. So let's bear that one in mind. But I think when you start off research, one of the things to think about is, or one of the questions is, what do I already know? What do I already know about this audience? What do I already know about this sector? So that energy drink sector is obviously dominated by some pretty heavy hitting brands. So it's quite mature in terms of what the dynamics within that sector are. So there are certain audiences, I would imagine, that the likes of Red Bull chase after and target regularly. So immediately, I'm always in telling people, go and find who's dominating the sector and see what they're doing well, see what they're not doing so well, work out where the opportunities are, let those guys spend all the money, and then you step back and just take a look at, how many segments are there within Red Bull, within Relentless, et cetera, So that's the first thing is, what do I currently know? What's the background in that sector? And then the second thing to work out is, research, roughly speaking, and there's a little chalkboard behind me, and I don't know if you can see, guys, but at the top it says, one says behavior and one says attitude. Essentially, when we talk about research, we split them into those two sections. So in other words, what do people think and feel about CBD drinks or energy drinks? And what do they actually do? What's their behavior patterns? What are their triggers for buying, etc.? So in this case, I would be thinking, how do people feel about CBD generally? Because CBD energy drinks feels like a new product to me. And it might be that our audience aren't quite sure or have certain reservations about that. So I'd be thinking, right, let's go out and talk to them and just work out what they think about CBD. Just talk to them and just start to hear certain things. And I would imagine after about half a dozen conversations, you'd pick up some patterns.
Yeah.
So what you've got there is, I've got some information. On one hand, I've got some attitudinal stuff about what people think about CBD. And then I've got some sort of behavioral stuff about what the sector and market looks like. So what I'm doing is I'm just like the detective. I'm gathering the evidence. I'm pulling this together. And then what you're going to start to see is that you will have a look and you'll start to see certain patterns emerge. It might be, for example, that people for Relentless and Red Bull really like it for its hit, but really, really not sure about the sugar content. Might they be the types of people who we could move towards our CBD energy drink? And so what we're going to start to do is sort of bring these two things together and start to overlap the research and start to build this picture. And it's okay, it's perfectly okay to begin with for that to be slightly fractured and look slightly complex. But the more data you collect, the more you can start to refine that. So the other thing you can do in this instance is, if you go out and interview people to find out attitudinally what they think about it, is pose to them what I call the magic wand question, which is, what if I were to create an energy drink with CBD in it? How would you feel about that? Or what would the ideal energy drink look like to you? And you let them paint the picture of what their desired product brand actually looks and feels like. And then that's going to give you a clear picture of what those particular audiences are expecting. And so magic wand questions are brilliant, because you can say to the audience, hey, look, if you were in my role, if you were in my seat, how would you design it? Give me the ideal product or brand.
I think it's really interesting that you come up with this magic wand question, because when I was studying in design school, they always told me, like, never ask people what they want. And they used the example of Henry Ford, of like, if I would have asked people what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse. So if you ask people to paint a picture for you, I think Alice was also asking this question in chat, like, how do you make sure that you don't lead them to your desired answer? Like, please tell me that you actually think bringing a CBD drink into the office would make you look like a junkie. Like, please tell me that. So, or something along those lines, because that's what you want to hear. Yeah,
that's fine. But do you know what? You can also, and that happens a lot, you can also do the reverse. You could say to that audience, tell me why you think making an energy drink out of CBD is such a ridiculous idea. And then what you start to unpick are the barriers. And actually that's really interesting, because you know that those are the things we need to overcome somehow, either in the product features or in the way that we describe and articulate the brand. And so you're absolutely right, guys, to pick up on it, because biases, we've all got them. They're inherent in us, unfortunately. It's a quirk of human nature, but you need to work the biases out of any of the research that you do. But actually what you can then do to unbias yourself is ask the opposite question. It's like showing a piece of work and saying, you just tell me what's wrong with this, rather than saying, tell me what you think of this. So you nudge people towards giving you the negatives, which sometimes works, because generally speaking, because we're such lovely human creatures, we like to say things we think the other person wants to hear. Yeah, absolutely.
So another thing that I see a lot of people in our community struggle with, and myself as well, is the case that when it comes to products and services, it's quite, well, I wouldn't say easy. I'm not saying Ado has it easy, but it's a little bit more straightforward when you talk about a food product than if you're talking about a more complex product or service, like an educational product or a consultancy product. So one of the things that I really loved about your podcast is, so if you guys haven't listened to George's podcast yet, there's a brilliant one on ginger nut biscuits. Is that right? Ginger nut biscuits.
Yeah, that's it. Ginger nut biscuits. Yeah.
So being from the Netherlands, I'd never heard of ginger nut biscuits, but this is apparently the #1 biscuit in the UK, right?
It's one of the most popular, yeah.
Yeah. So for me, so just kind of the way that you audience detectived your way into all the different reasons why people might be eating these biscuits. That was just fascinating.
Thank you.
I thought, wouldn't it be wonderful if we can get that same kind of thinking and then hear you kind of think that through with a more abstract example. So that's why I was really pleased that Andy was willing to come on the call today. Andy, I'll let you introduce yourself. Andy has a service that's a little bit more complex than the ginger nut biscuit. And I thought that would be fantastic for us to unpack. Andy, do you want to tell us what you do?
Hey, George, and nice to see so many classmates' faces from Brand the Change Academy. So some of this will be familiar to a few of you, but so for me, change and transformation are really what I care about. And the work that I've been doing inside other organizations is helping organizations become more innovative and effective and ultimately more human. And what, as I sort of pivot into the next stage of things, I'd like to work with more progressive leaders who are, really ready to reframe the questions, rethink problems, and really work to build an innovation mindset. But a lot of this work is happening in like big companies and not in that sort of like middle category of businesses and the types of leaders who are sort of aligning with, values more similar to my own. And so my past success in finding like freelance projects that have just mostly found me is getting to know interesting people as humans first. So through introductions or just kind of those happenstance bump-ins at conferences, and winning them over by building a personal relationship. But that has a scalability issue to it. And so I'd love to hear more about how I find potential clients when for the large part of my experiences, they don't even know that they're looking for someone who does what I do.
Yeah, it's interesting. Thanks for that, Andy. I was having a good old think about this before I came on the call, and Anne's absolutely right. I've painted a rather simplistic picture of research when I talk about ginger nut biscuits, but equally, we, the team, in my day job, run a lot of research in the B2B space, as you've just articulated. So here's what I understand about where you are with stuff, Andy, and that is that you have, and I spoke earlier about always stop and have a wee bit of a think about, what do you already know about this audience? And you're right, what do we know about these people as human beings? Because it's all too easy, particularly in business to business brands, communications, for it to be very, very transactional and a bit dry, and we forget about the human element, but it's really important. So Andy, what I understand is that you have a pretty good feel for the values of these people and you want to align them with those of yourselves. You want to engage with people who want to leave the world in a better place, who want to do the right thing. I believe you've got a really good feel for how, what that sector looks like. I think we talked about mid-size enterprises. So we're not looking for the big blue chip corporates. We're looking for something a wee bit smaller like that. So you've already got an idea about the values that they share and how you want to align them with themselves. So, and that's really important because actually a lot of the time, particularly in qualitative research, what we're trying to understand is, how does my customer view value? Is value cost? Is it price? Is it purpose? Is it delivery? Is it all sorts of other things? So we're trying to understand how they see value in what you do or in the sector as a whole. So for me, what you would do is start to try and understand from them, how do they prioritize those values. What's important to them? Is it profit first? Is it happiness? Is it impact? Is it legacy? So get a feel for the types of values that really make those guys get up in the morning and do the job. What I also understand from them, Andy, is that they are so busy, they're in the thick of it running the day-to-day. These are very busy people. It's going to be difficult to track down, pin them down and have a conversation with them. They're really unaware that someone like your good self, Andy, can actually benefit them. They're probably unaware of the impact you could have on their business. So we've got these things that somehow, though your audience is just not thinking about, they're just not aware of them. It's not because they're silly or anything. It's just not on their radar. So what I would do to tap into that is try and understand from them, what does an average day look like? And you would use questions like, and I talk about this in the book, help me understand your day. Talk me through what happens from the moment you get up and all the trials and tribulations of the day to when you get home, you have dinner with family or whatever it is. So get a feel for what their day looks like, so you can really start to empathize. And then I think for you, it's really unpicking two things. Excuse me. One are triggers. What's the trigger for buying a service from yourself, Andy? And what are the barriers that are getting in the way? So you would pose questions to them like, what would it take for you to engage with a consultant like me and my services, if at all? What do you think the impact is if you don't get help supporting, what you need to do in your business? And then pose other things and try and understand how they see value, how they project it on other people, and ask questions around, have you seen anyone else in your sector who have succeeded? If so, what did you see about what they did? And so what we start to do is almost subconsciously make them aware of some of these factors, some of these issues. And then the other thing is, and this is equally applicable to the CBD drink conversation we had a few moments ago, Anne, is how do they currently solve this problem? What in one instance, what energy drinks do I drink? And in the other instance, right, I'm so busy running my day-to-day mid-size enterprise that I just bumble from one day to the next. So my way of solving the problem is I go home and drink 2 bottles of wine. I don't know, I'm using an example, but get a feeling for how they're currently solving the problem. And it might be that problem is not acute enough for them to actually solve. It might be it's something we just poke up with, a bit like, I don't know, having a toothache and we can't be bothered to go to the dentist. So what we want to really, really focus on in that instance, when you're in high-end consultancy, is triggers and barriers, values, triggers for purchase, and barriers to purchase.
Can I ask you a question, George? Maybe I'm
Please do.
cutting off Andy's path of questions, but what I often notice with B2B clients is that it's actually really hard to find the first person to talk to because you aren't personally connected to them. So maybe this is you're making a career switch and you want to focus on a new group. I know there's someone, for instance, in this space who just recently is making the switch towards social entrepreneurs and hasn't built a network yet. So when you start asking people these kind of questions, of course, it's, there's this thinking like, if you frame it the right way, someone's always open to have like, a cup of coffee with you. There's a really nice, I'll share a link to that. There's a good course about career interviews from Stanford that talks all about like how you can frame an interview actually as a benefit to the person who's being interviewed. But I was wondering if you have any tips on like, where do you find the first person and how do you convince them to have that conversation with you to begin with?
Yeah, it's not easy. It's a great question. It's not easy. I finished probably about 3 weeks ago a study for quite a big B2B IT consultancy firm who operate almost exclusively in the city of London, Frankfurt, Paris, blah, blah, blah. And I would say it took me a good 6 weeks to actually find the right people to talk to. I mean, LinkedIn is the ultimate tool in this regard, because you've got the ability to target the right person via sector, job title, location, etc. So that's a really, really useful tool. And secondly is literally through a lot of networking and referrals and talking to people and saying, look, I'm trying to find these types of people. Do you know anybody who looks like this? And it does take time, but I tell you what, if you can, this is when if you have the power of the network, it's such a valuable thing to have and build over time. So I spend a lot of time working with LinkedIn groups, a lot of closed groups in specific industry sectors, just trying to work with the admin of that group to gain some trust so that I can actually go in and start talking to their audience. And I'm very, very transparent about what I want to get from that. And the biggest barrier, and we talk about barriers here, the biggest barrier to that is their instinct is that they think you're going to come in and start selling to them. And I'm not. All I want to do is ask questions and listen to the answers. But I think the most powerful tool for me has been personal network and LinkedIn. And don't forget those closed groups I mentioned. Because if you can build a relationship with some of the people who are the admins or the managers of those communities, establish some trust, make sure you're not, going to sort of do anything that's sort of not non-ethical, then that is a great approach to go down.
Andy, did you have a follow-up question?
Yeah, I had a follow-up question on just sort of like, and George, you might not be able to answer this, so I'm open to others chipping in, but I find in this type of work, it was actually someone in my class who gave me the analogy of like looking for a psychiatrist. These folks typically start by what can they figure out themselves by looking at the HBR articles and all the rest of it. Then they kind of like go the next level up of an investment. And then the third phase is like they look for a referral.
Yeah.
And that's really like where the currency handoff is. And so I'm wondering, in the B2B work that you've done in sort of like similar type boutique consultancy spaces, what role you've seen the like brand presence of like a website or whatnot contribute to that? Because for me, what I find is like, it's not how like business comes in, it's the validation once someone has handed them my name, that's where they'll go and look, but they're not going to find me through that. So I'm just wondering if there's anything in terms of that, the validation audience finding in the next phase of this journey.
Yeah, damn, you keep giving me good questions, don't you, Andy? But no, it's a great question. So I'll tell you one thing. I've got two brilliant researchers who work with me. And we were looking, and we've done a lot of, over the last year, probably a handful of big qualitative studies in the B2B space. And do you know what? One of the biggest themes coming out of it is, I will get to the point in just a moment, Andy, but what I wanted to say, and I've written it down on my notes here, is, and I'll be quite simplistic, business to consumer, consumer brands, you're talking to people who buy the stuff from their own pocket. They buy the energy drinks and the food and whatever it is. That transaction is relatively simple. It's one person. As you know, with B2B, there's all sorts of people involved. There's gatekeepers, there's sponsors, there's people who write the purchase orders, there's people who report back to the board, there's analysts. It's very, very complex. And what that leads to is a huge amount of loss aversion. Now, if you're familiar with this concept of loss aversion, then you'll know that humans generally, experience a loss more acutely than we do a gain. So losing 10 euros hurts more than finding 10 euros down the back of the sofa. That's how we're wired. And that is acutely at play within business to business from what we've seen, because people are making decisions about spending other people's money. And what that means is they worry about the decision, they worry about looking silly, they worry about losing face with stakeholders and board members, and that drives a lot of the decision making. So decision making in B2B becomes very, very about risk mitigation. And so your approach, so the process you've just described, Andy, which is read some articles on HBR, contact someone, look for a referral. What's happening is at every stage in that journey, people are trying to mitigate risk. They're trying to say, if I read the article, I'll know more. If I ask for a referral and it backfires, I can blame it on them. And you can see that loss aversion is massively at play because there's huge amount of sums of money involved. And so it's critical in understanding B2B to get to the emotional motivations of who you're talking to. Because ordinarily, and from what we've seen in the last handful of studies, 4 out of 5, the dominant dynamic at play is loss aversion, is they're worried, they're scared. Now, this is where brand comes to the fore hugely. So the brand's job there is reassurance, is, look, we've got you back here. We know what we're doing. We've done it before, and we're all about you. So that is where B2B paradoxically needs brand more than anyone else. So what you should be looking for is looking out for those signs of loss aversion, digging into the emotions at play. And then I would guess that if you ask the person the question in more than 3 or 4 ways, you'll get to the truth. And they'll say something like, do you know what? I'm just scared. I'm just worried. I just don't know what to do. And boom, you've got it.
So if you found an insight like this, George, then knowing like, okay, a huge role, like the role that my personal brand plays, like in the case of Andy, based on this insight, is that this brand needs to instill trust, which is obviously a huge role for brand in general. But the practical way that needs to come across is like obviously displaying professionalism and having lots of social proof from other names that these types of people relate to. Would you have any other tips or trips about like how do you display or what types of trust are people in the B2B space sensitive to?
Yeah, I think one tip in that would be don't say show. Far too much of B2B, and we've all
Ernest
seen
Hemingway.
Yeah, we've seen B2B brands. They're all bright and shiny, and they're very two-dimensional. It's quite difficult for the audience to actually get in because it's all bright and shiny. But what it doesn't show is the workings out, is how people are thinking, what the process is, who are the people behind it, how do we make sure that this happens? How does it physically work? If I lift up the bonnet, how does it actually work? What does it look like underneath? So often, particularly when you look at how B2B brands manifest themselves on websites, what they don't like to do is show anything that shows any detail of how things actually work. It's all sort of analogies and sort of, our business is like a graceful swan. Well, it doesn't really mean much to anybody. So if you can be more tangible and more vivid and descriptive with what it is you do, then that's where the trust comes to the fore, because someone can look at it and go, okay, that's how they do it. Well, these guys don't show me that. All I can see are swans. But what I've got here is a nice process diagram. And then all of a sudden they're into the communication and they're starting to feel that this thing is something they can get hold of and believe in. I don't know if that answers your question, Anne.
Yeah, it's given me a lot to think about, partly because all, like, when you go look at these websites of folks who I would say are like in the same space, they all use the exact same language. We are creative, we are innovative, we're curious, we're empathetic. Like there's like a 10 or 12 adjectives that are pretty consistent. And so like, how do you actually make a differentiator? And the other than my like second thought is like, do you need to? Because I think they're in this other swath of folks. Most people in the like boutique consulting, the like business model is go after the like the big clients, as opposed to going like, instead of going for the unicorn, go for a herd of zebras. And so like, how do you build something in that has a slightly different business model as well? So thank you.
Yeah, no, you're welcome.
I think one of the things that Andy's example also really shows is, I think for a lot of people in our community are independents, and if you're at the start of your career and you're just building your network, it's a really tough uphill battle. And then if you have products or services that are a little bit more abstract and really rely on word of mouth, it just means a huge investment. So if you're, working on your product, but also working on your business, it just means that you're investing so much time. And so I think people feel like, yeah, if I invest in brand, the brand should start doing a lot of the heavy lifting for me. But I'm not going to be able to do like, or do I want to do like Facebook ads? Or so at the end of the day, what you end up, even if you put a stronger brand in place, what you end up still relying on is what Andy was saying, like getting people referrals that lead to a website that then hopefully results in a yes. But hopefully there are other ways that you can get to know your audience so that you find more places that you could actually get in front of them that are a little bit easier to scale, so that you no longer need to rely on only that personal introduction and that heavy lifting. I'm sure, I think that might be worth a little brainstorm for those people who would be interested in it. But if you do research, George, do you, for instance, also look at, well, in the case of Andy, like her clients would be exactly the type of people who go to this conference. So now that I've figured that out, I need to make sure Andy gets in front of those people at that conference to talk about her work, because that's exactly the right match. Like, do you actually make recommendations based on your research, or is that the dominion of whoever you're working with to draw those conclusions?
Yeah, that's another good question. Coming thick and fast this afternoon, aren't they? But yeah, you touched on conferences, expos, whatever we want to call them. They are a gold mine, particularly in B2B, because you have a very distinct audience targeted perfectly for you. They're there. And so I spend, obviously lockdown, we're out of lockdown over here in the UK, so we haven't done a whole lot of conferencing in about 18 months, but I spend a lot of time at trade shows and conferences, just walking around, literally getting slightly odd looks, because, just talk to everybody and just, especially the punters, and say, what's the difference between that vendor there and that one there? Or who do you think I need to go and, whose stand should I go and visit? Or is there a breakout seminar I need to go to? What do you think about that? And what I then do is talk to the event organizers and to say to them, look, what are the themes emerging? What's everybody talking about? What can I gather from this very, very finite audience that I can then use to then go back to the client and say, look, I was at IT Expo last week in XL London, and I got 5 top themes that I heard about, and I need to talk to you about those things. So again, it's quite a simple way of just getting a little bit of information from people on the ground. And they'll tell you, if you walk up to them and say, look, can I buy you a coffee? I just need to know about, the last one I went to, it was all about cybersecurity within IT. It's massive, and I kept saying to look, tell me what I need to know about this. Who do I need to speak to? Who's at play in this market? you know, what's everybody worried about? You know, what are the IT directors saying and worrying about, and why aren't they sleeping at night? And so you find out those pieces of information, and just start to, like I mentioned right before, which start to plot it together in a, you know, like on those kind of detective movies, have everything pinned up on the board, don't they? Suspect, location, weapon. Start to bring these pieces of data together and paint yourself a picture of what's happening.
I can also imagine that even if not all the information that you're gathering necessarily is related to your specific product or service, just better understanding their mindset is overall a plus in developing your brand and communications.
Yeah, it is. It's just sort of being curious about people and why they do what they do and why they buy certain things and don't do other things. And one thing just to obviously talk about, and I mentioned a funny drawing on my blackboard, which is, you know, what people say and what they do. Well, I probably don't need to tell you that, but what people say and what they actually do are sometimes two very, very different things. And this is why it makes sense to do as many different strands of research as you can. Because, I mean, I saw a study the other day and it said, I can't remember, 20% of these people go to the gym twice a week. And then I went to the gym the other day and I asked somebody, how often do you actually go to the gym? Well, maybe once every 2 weeks. So what people are saying, what they're actually doing, there's a big, big disconnect in between.
Yeah, I think this is so true. And one of the things that really bothers me is whenever I see research comes out that says like millennials and Gen Z, they prefer brands with the same values as them. Because it's always like, okay, you've asked 1,000 people and 70% of them said that. But we have a daily test whether that's true or not. And actually that daily test is a supermarket shelf. And I can definitely attest to the fact that 70% of people is not following their values in every single purchase decision, right? So yeah, I know that you prepared some information, some slides about like all those different types of research. Would this be a good moment to jump into that?
Yeah, of course. Let me just see if I can share.
By the way, everyone who's on this call, you're also welcome to join in for questions. Oh, I see a question for George from George. About qualitative and quantitative dimensions. So that's exactly what you're, I think, going to talk about. So that's a good break.
Yeah, sure. Let me just see if I can share. I've got two screens on the go here, folks. So please shout if you can see my.
Yes.
Should be loading. Can you see slide that
Perfect.
says? Yeah. Okay. So broadly, I've only got 3 slides here, folks. I'm hopefully not going to, you know, overwhelm you with too much information, but just to sort of touch on again, there's 2 areas. It's behind me on the blackboard, but here on the slide, which is when you're starting off on the project, think of research as new knowledge, and you ask yourself, you know, what do you want to find out? What's important to you? Are you trying to find out attitudinally? On the left, you know, finding out what people say, how they feel about stuff, what their attitudes are to, we talked about CBD, for example, how that is in play. And behaviorally, you're observing what people are actually doing. They might be saying that, but actually with behavioral research, what you're looking at is what people actually do. And as we've just touched on in the middle of your screen there is a gap between that. And so be wary of what people say to you, because people generally say things they think you want to hear, which is why it's really important when you're asking people to get the data point. And if you feel like they're saying it just to make you happy, it's called acquiescence bias, then just say to them, okay, just tell me that again. And then flip it round in the other way and see if you can get a real answer from them. Because often asking the same question in 3 different ways, you generally get to the truth. But anyway, so those are our 2 sets of things we're looking to try and discover, an attitude or a behavior. And so hopefully this next slide, I don't want it to overwhelm you too much, but let's think about research methods. So don't worry too much, but there are a whole bunch of tools we can use based on whether or not you're looking at behavior or attitude. So that's top and bottom. And then so your two basic types of research, left and right. On the left-hand side, we've got qualitative research. And so that's when you want to try and understand, what experiences people are having. How do they go about engaging with a consultant that helps them get out the day-to-day? How do they feel about CBD? And then when you want to understand a process or an event, you might say to them, talk to me about the timeline, about how you decide when to bring in a consultant. Talk to me about when and where you buy an energy drink. What's the trigger for that? Know those types of questions. So what we're capturing in qualitative data are words, what people say, simple as that. So the questions you're asking are going to be, why do you think that? Or why do you do that? Let's explore that more. Can you describe that process for me? So ordinarily you're doing this one-to-one with people over a call like we're on at the moment or on the phone. And so over on the right-hand side, what you're looking to understand with quantitative numbers is by how much, how big is this phenomenon? So what we're saying here is, what facts do you want to verify or establish? How many people buy energy drinks? How many male, how many female, how old are they? Those types of things. To what extent and by how much? How many more girls buy energy drinks than boys? Those types of questions. And the data captured within quantitative is obviously numbers, and we're reporting percentages, stuff like that. And so what we're asking people is, normally in a survey format, is, which energy drink is best? Or Red Bull's better than Relentless. Do you agree or disagree? Or score consultancy services for mid-size enterprises 1 out of 10 for service. Which brand do you prefer, X or Y? So quantitative is collecting the what, qualitative is discovering the why. So broadly speaking, those are our two types of research.
Can I ask you a question, George, here?
Please do.
I noticed that I hear you mention both people who are customers and people who are not. So if you're thinking about a CBD drink, there might be people who drink energy drinks who have good reasons to drink them. There might be people who don't drink it and have good reasons, and both would provide you with answers. The same for Andy. There might be people who already are hiring design thinking consultants or strategy consultants, and there are people who don't for good reason. And so how do you decide which? Should you do both groups? Is it like an A/B test kind of thing?
Yeah, you can do. What I would advise is, if you've got customers, I would start with them. Start with the ones who are closest to you, and then move on from there. If you haven't got customers and you're looking at a new product launch, perhaps a bit like CBD that's relatively new, is go out and find and recruit people who have got the closest propensity to buy that product that you think you can get. So as you say, people who regularly buy energy drinks, or who regularly use CBD products, just as a suggestion. And you can generally target and effectively target those people either by Facebook, because Facebook works really well in that regard when we're talking to consumers, or you can go to an audience panel and actually prescribe, like you would a campaign, the types of people you want to talk to and their interests. But I would always say start with the closest people to you. If you've got customers, start there. Almost establish a control of what you think's happening, and then sort of scale it up.
Yeah, I think that's a really good tip. One of my clients once gave me this fantastic piece of advice. He said, or he asked me, how do you lead a horse to water? And I was like, this is clearly a trick question that I don't know the answer to. And then he said, you have to find thirsty horses. So there's no point in dragging the unthirsty horse to the water. It's much easier, or it's much less heavy lifting, for people who are already keen. You're going to share a few more slides, and then we have a question from Hadass and Lungi in the chat as well.
Okay, I've got one more slide just to touch on, really, and that's just giving you guys an idea of the tools available to you. I mean, I think once you work out what you want to know, what new knowledge do you want to elicit from the study, then what are you trying to understand, how people, what their attitudes are or what their behaviors are. And then you've got a whole bunch of tools available to you, and there are more. I've just put just a few down just to talk you through. So on the qualitative tool set, we've got those one-to-one interviews over Zoom or on the phone, and you can use what I call expert interviews. So sometimes those are interviews with your client, not necessarily their customers, but your clients. You can get awesome insights from people who know the product intimately. So expert interviews and target market, as we've just described. So people who actually the end users of the product or the service. So you've got those one-to-one interviews. You've got focus groups, which I'm sure you guys are potentially familiar with, where you've got some stimuli, maybe a concept board or an identity or something. And then you moderate the focus group with 6 people who you think are perhaps potentially closest to who your target market are. That's a qualitative approach. And then you've got moderated website usability testing, which is effectively almost getting someone onto your client's website, get an end customer onto your client website, and you're asking them to perform a test. For example, I want you to go onto the homepage, navigate to services, and add this product to the basket. So moderated website user testing enables you to ask those people, how easy was it to find the services tab? What do you think of the content? Tell me how you would get to this. And then you're observing what it is they're up to there. Quantitative on the right-hand side is where it gets slightly more technical. You've got tools like Google Analytics, which is going to give you user information, a bit of demographics, how people are behaving on site. You've got things like card sorting and tree testing. So these tools help you understand how people categorize and prioritize content in words and stuff like that. Net Promoter Score, which you guys may have heard of, and customer surveys, they work really well. And then you've got A/B multivariate testing, which Anne just mentioned a few moments ago, where you're testing concepts and creative treatments, A and B, and analyzing results. But in that regard, again, we're collecting numbers. 20% people preferred variant A to B, etc., etc. So roughly speaking, there's quite a few tools out there for you to use. And the good news is that you guys can do a lot of this stuff yourself. You don't need to use expensive research folks. There's platforms out there that can help you sort of serve a lot of what you see on your screen there. That's it. I didn't want to overload it too much. I hope that's of some use to you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. I think anyone who has questions, specific questions about like, hey, I have this sort of question, George, which kind of tool should I use? Super welcome to just paste them in the chat. Because I think in some cases it's just really helpful now, like, okay, this type of problem needs that type of tool. I remember when I bought my first house and someone told me like, oh, if you need to, all that refurbishing that you need to do, the one thing you need to know is you just have to, it's all about having the right tools. I was like, yeah, how do I know that I have the right, I don't know. So I think it'd be helpful maybe if some people do have questions, just bring them up. There was a good question from Hadass, and Lungi kind of seconded that as well. There's of course a lot of kind of anecdotal evidence that you don't really need to do user research. You just like kind of the Steve Jobs or Henry Ford example of like, I just have such a good pulse, and I started something, I did no research and it launched. It was a fantastic success. And so Hadass was kind of thinking about like, is it, in your experience, is that actually something that happens, that is common? Is that totally the exception? Are some companies indeed successful without research? Or are they just kind of forgetting that they're actually doing a lot of research, but they're just not calling it that? What's your experience with that kind of cultural phenomenon?
Yeah, I mean, I think, the Henry Ford analogy, I've heard that many times, although I have also read that what he doesn't talk about, or what he didn't talk about as much, is he did do quite a lot of research. But anyway, that's besides the point. I'm slightly biased anyway, so I need to be careful of this. But it happens, it happens, and entrepreneurs and creative people, the likes of all who are on this call, in my experience, generally have an empathetic feel for what customers need, for what people want. They have a good feel for that. So they've got quite an intuitive approach to it, which I think gives you guys a head start. And so I think, especially in startup creative circles, we were not surrounded by oodles of bureaucracy. We can go out and talk to customers. We can have calls like this without having to sign paperwork and non-disclosure agreements, et cetera, et cetera. We've got access to people, and we're not afraid to go out and find it. And yes, so people can design brands and services without doing oodles of research, and it can be an enormous success. And that is, for me, that's brilliant. It's fantastic. The main reason, what I would say on that is, we've debriefed quite a few research projects recently where the reaction is from the stakeholders. The reaction was, yeah, we knew that. And that's great too, because even if you've got a gut feel for what's going on, and your research backs that up, it gives you a heck of a lot of confidence. It's like, right, I was right. This is good. And now it's been backed up by data. And now I'm going to plow my efforts into rolling this thing out. It just gives you that level of confidence. And that's what we've heard with stakeholders, which was, I didn't really hear anything new, but now I know for sure. And I'm now going to go to the board and ask for an extra, 3 million euros to roll this thing out. So it's that extra level of confidence you can get.
Yeah, I think that's a really good, and I guess, and again, that comes to like, business people are more than just business people. They have emotions, and emotions are really powerful.
Yeah.
One of the things that I see with the people who come through our programs is that you often start from an insight in your personal life. Like, this is something that bothers me. This is a problem that I have. And because I have this problem, there must be tons of people who have this problem. And so in some cases, like, yes, the problem that you're solving, your solution has wings because a lot of people recognize it. And maybe you got lucky in the way that you described it, or maybe you got it in right at the right time, but it just like, it's that kind of magical moment. But I think so here in Nairobi, we have a saying, which is that we have a lot of we have a lot of solutions looking for problems. Because what ends up happening is that people have this idea, like, this is an issue, I have a solution for it, and everyone else is like, yeah, I don't got that problem. And so it never takes off. And so I think you can never be too curious about what people are actually, what the problems in their life are and what they're experiencing, because it's just a tremendous waste of your life years if you're trying to, again, using the horse as an example, if you're trying to drag a horse to water, and the horse doesn't want the water in any way. So is there anyone who has questions for George? Any questions that we've left on the table? Specific questions you might want a tool for, or something that's bothering you at work this week that you're like, oh, if only I knew a little bit more about my audience, about my customer, life would just be so much better.
I was just looking at,
Yeah.
I was looking at the questions in the chat there.
Oh yeah, Lungi has her hand up.
Oh, okay,
Lungi,
right.
welcome. Lungi is in South Africa. And
Hello.
she always brings the good questions.
Excellent. Hi, yeah.
Hi, George. Hi, Anne. I think maybe now it's not so much of a question as a comment, maybe, but I tend to doodle on Pinterest sometimes and came across a little quote that said, "Successful brands of the future don't care about branding, they care about people." So, but I think in your explanation, George, around loss aversion, particularly with B2B clients, it sort of answered my question, because then I started wondering, do you think that there would come a point where we don't really have the B2C, B2B distinction anymore, given that so much of creative economy meets impact economy is just about society and just about people at the end of the day? So, but I think in some way you kind of answered a bit of that question, but maybe you have some thoughts on that.
It's a really interesting thought you've posed there, because I'm with you on it, I must say, because I can't remember who it was, but I remember a number of years ago when somebody said, a very, very well-known guy who'd created, it might have been the guy, I've forgotten his name, thingy from Nike, Mr. Nike Man, said something like, you know, brands,
Shoe dog?
yeah, something like it, said something along the lines of, you know, in the future, brands are going to be all about, you know, it's not what happens when the ad's on or when I see the brand, it's all the other stuff that's relevant towards the brand. And I think that's what you're kind of getting to, is these demarcations between business, life, business over here, purpose over here, is going to slowly bleed into each other, is my gut feel. And I'm pretty sure that these B2B companies we've been talking about with huge amounts of loss aversion aren't going to look like they do at the moment in 20, 30 years time. They're just not. I think there's the landscape's going to be drastically different. And maybe loss aversion won't be such a thing, because we're not going to be so worried about making the wrong decision and being too concerned with ego or what so-and-so in finance thinks of so-and-so in sales, and those types of sort of Machiavellian principles that are in play in big corporates. Let's hope that, you know, business is going to look and feel a lot different. I'm quite hopeful that it will.
Yeah, and do you find, I guess maybe maybe I'm putting words in your mouth, George, but when people say things like, oh, you know, the future of branding is, or branding, I often feel like they work from what I think is a mistaken assumption of what branding really is, which is about building relationship with people. And so a lot of the kind of big statements about how startups are successful, or how Nike got successful, or Apple got successful, those are all anecdotes, and they're not actually always based on reality. They're just the conclusions that people have drawn through their own biases about, like, well, this, you know, this very well might have been the key to success, but none of us know unless we do a really rigorous study. So I feel like that again comes back to the world probably needs a lot more research and a lot less statements, if we're kind of able to, if we're going to be able to learn about how we build better businesses, especially for social and environmental change.
Yeah, I think you bang on. I mean, we're getting into sort of dangerous into neuroscience here, but one thing that our brains do as humans is they're very, very good at making up stories. That's why stories are they feel so natural to us. That's why we swim towards them when we see and hear them. But our brains are really good at that. And we say, oh, it ended up being like that because this happened and that happened and that happened. And we join the dots. And that's what the brain does. But it misses out any details that conflict with the story it's just constructed, because we're fundamentally biased in how we look at the world around us. You know, it's a picture that's drawn in our brains. So we need to be cognizant of that. But you're right, all these rather lovely, whimsical stories about how brand got from A to B are easy to look back on, aren't they, in hindsight, and say it was a very distinct journey, but actually at the moment you're in at the moment looking forward, it looks completely chaotic. And I sometimes think that that's where research can be with you on the journey, helping you light the way forward, and hoping you, steering you away from the banana skins as you move forward on your journey.
Do you have, maybe as a closing question, because I'm aware we're a little bit over time already, but any banana peels that you've encountered in your career that you're like, oh, when you're first getting started in research, like, keep this one in mind, because boy, was I ever, did I ever mess that one up?
Yeah, I mean, I've got loads of stories about messing up, and I'm happily to fess up on them. One thing I would leave you with is that in a previous life, I was a creative director. I worked in ad agencies, and we pulled together a big launch for a large telco whose name I'm not going to repeat. And it was launched to fanfare. The client loved it, blah, blah, blah. And I actually went into a call center and I was listening into the inbound calls coming in from the customers and listening to what they were saying about the campaign. And they were saying stuff like, I didn't understand half of it. I couldn't see that. This bit didn't make sense. And I just remember walking out that call center, sort of in complete disbelief, thinking, oh my goodness me, we thought we had it so right, but we got it so wrong. And the campaign bombed. It absolutely bombed. And it was at that moment I just thought to myself, I don't want to repeat that again. It was just too painful. And I think that was the trigger that made me think I need to start listening to people a bit more and stop believing that I have all the answers.
In the brand and marketing space, I mean, historically, I think there's not that much research being done. A lot of the kind of, crazy madman kind of attitude of the big egos with the big creative ideas. Do you think we're at a turning point with that now, where more and more people are like, yeah, maybe we should do some research on whether this works or not? Yeah,
I think, I've still got friends in that business who tell me, that it's still, the planner or the creative director making all the calls on this and disregarding the research. But equally, I hear other stories about, no, we don't do it like that anymore. We do it like this. So I think it's perhaps at a bit of a crossroads at the moment. And I hope that it moves over, because the win-win here is if you can get the research and the amazing creative execution on top of it, then you're in the business there, aren't you? You're really you're gonna hit gold. So here's hoping.
Cool. Well, if anyone after this session isn't motivated to dive into their own little audience research, I think the experiments that George describes on the biscuit and then later on the bread are a very easy way, kind of a little roadmap to get into research ourselves. So thanks so much, George, for joining us today and for putting together all that fantastic content.
Thank you. Not at all.
And if we get any more follow-up questions after this, I'll be sure to see if we can ring in George a second time.
Sure, more than happy to. It's been great talking and working with you guys this afternoon. Thanks for coming.
Thanks so much, George. And I hope that things in the UK continue to look good, and we hope to get rid of these masks soon as well.
Okay. All right then. Brilliant. All the very best.